Welcome to the Itihasa channel. Today we are going to discuss the advanced studies and the training that the Kuru princes receive. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Swami Sharnamayappo, Om Subramanyaya Namaha, Om Guruve Namaha. Following the incident in Pramana Koti, where Duryodhana, the eldest Kaurava prince, poisoned Bheema, the second Pandava prince, tied him up and rolled him down the Ganga in an attempt to kill him. Bheeshma realized that these boys need to channelize their energies properly. Left to themselves, they would go on conducting all kinds of subterfuge plans and creating a ruckus and trying to maim and kill each other, and that was not good for the kingdom. And Bheeshma was always on the lookout for a great teacher. Kripa was there in the Hastinapur kingdom from the time of Shantanu. We had discussed how Kripa and Kripi, the brother and sister duo, had been born from the seed of Sharadvatha, and how they were brought by Shantanu to the kingdom of Hastinapur and brought up in the Hastinapur kingdom. And Kripa was a great archer and a great warrior. And he was the first teacher that Bheeshma found for the Kuru princes. And Bheeshma ensured that a large Gurukula was set up under Kripa, and these boys would lead a regimented life where they would have no time to indulge in all these wasted thoughts and plans of harming and maiming each other. And so Kripa was the primary teacher of the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and eventually he taught them all he knew, and Bhishma realized that if the great Hastinapur kingdom was to have great kings and princes who would conquer most of the land, they would need to be taught at a far greater level than what Kripa could teach them. And so Bhishma was always on the lookout for a great teacher who could come and teach. And this great teacher presented himself one day in the form of Drona, the son of Bharadwaja, a master of war who had learnt all the astras and all the forms of war from his great father Bharadwaja and his Gurukula, and who later went to learn under the great Bhargava Parshurama, also a teacher of Bhishma. And when Bhishma found out that Drona was actually staying in the ashrama of Kripa, for his wife Kripi was the sister of Kripa. When Bhishma heard about it, and at the time when he found out about his presence in the ashrama through the incident with the ball that fell into the well, Bhishma knew that this was the greatest teacher that the Kuru princes could ever have. He opened his coffers out to Drona, for he knew that for Drona the only thing that mattered was money and the comfort and luxury for his son Aswatthama. Bhishma was an astute man. He knew people's weaknesses, and he knew Drona's weakness was wealth. And to this end, he ensured Drona would have nothing wanting. A Gurukula was set up on the outskirts of Hastinapur that boasted the largest quality of every attribute that could be seen in a Gurukula. It was a Gurukula that was never seen in any part of Bharatvarsha in those days. The quarters were luxurious, the cows were in abundance, and every form of training was available for the students to be trained. And as the Kuru princes, both the Kauravas and the Pandavas, started their training under the tutelage of Drona and with the assistance of Kripa and Kripi, it came to be known far and wide as the place to learn the art of war. And kings from all the surrounding kingdoms would then approach Bhishma and request that their children be taught in this ashrama, and soon the number of children being taught in this ashrama swelled. But Drona knew which side his bread was buttered, and at all times he knew that the ones who should be taught the maximum were the Kuru princes. And so one day he gathered all the Kuru princes, both the Pandavas and the Kauravas, young boys around him, and told them that today I am going to start the training which Bheeshma, your grandfather, has bestowed on me, and from now on you shall learn under me. And I shall teach you everything I know, and I shall make you great warriors. But at the end of the training, I will demand a Guru Dakshina of you, and you will have to do my bidding. Are you okay with it? Do you agree to it? But he didn't tell what that Guru Dakshina was going to be. And obviously, everyone was scared. What would this man ask of us? We don't even know him. He seems to be a great man, for he was able to bring his ring and a ball out from the well just using reeds and summoning the mantras and astras through those weeds. He did remarkable feats. Would he then ask us for our life? What would this man ask of us? And so there was silence all around, except one voice stood up and said, "Yes, my Guru, ask for what you want and I shall give it." And this was Arjuna, the third son of Kunti. Drona's high eyes watered. It swelled up and he took the great Arjuna in his arms, but a young boy, and hugged him and smelt his hair and said, "You are the one I shall make the greatest archer in all the land." And thence began the official training for the Pandavas and the Kauravas, and many other Kshatriya princes of the neighboring friendly kingdoms. It was a rigorous life in the ashrama. In the ashrama, they taught everything that would be known. Every form of knowledge was imparted there. Of course, being Kshatriyas and being primarily catered to the Kshatriya warrior race, the art of war took precedence over most other forms of education. But Kripa and Kripi ensured, and various other sages and rishis from all around the place were invited to teach the Vedas, the Angas, the Shastras, grammar, science, astrology, astronomy, metallurgy, astrophysics, medicine, and every form of knowledge system that was available at the time was taught in this great Gurukula. Rishis and gurus from all around the place were recruited to teach the various aspects. It was like a university with specialization in every course for everyone. And such was the Gurukula of Dronacharya. The great Drona came to be known as Dronacharya. That people from all over knew that the Kshatriyas who would come out of this Gurukula would be a class apart, having no equal in all the land. Life in the ashrama was quite rigid. It was run like a regimented barracks by the great Dronacharya. All the princes had to be awake by 3:30 in the morning, had to rush down to the river to freshen up and have their bath, and then bringing water up in their pots to fill the large urns kept for the Guru Dronacharya's bath and the large urns kept for the cooking. They had to then assemble at the Guru Dronacharya's feet for the theoretical training of the day. And so the theoretical training would start at 4 in the morning, when the minds were fresh at the Brahma Muhurta, when they would be able to imbibe the maximum of knowledge. This was on till 6 in the morning, when they would break for their yoga. And there would be an intense 2-hour session of yoga from 6 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock in the morning, where absolutely every muscle of the body would be stretched to become supple and strong. This was followed by a sumptuous breakfast. This was followed by horse riding, riding the chariot and riding on elephants, and various other animals of war. This was followed by archery, training everybody in the art of using the bow and the arrow, using a spear to fight, using a mace to fight, and using a sword and the axe. Skills of every form of weapon were taught to these children. By turn, these princes were sent to the mess hall to take part in the daily cooking that would happen in the mornings. For the art of cooking was a necessary art that was to be learnt by these princes. And so there was an all round development for these princes. By 8, after a sumptuous breakfast, these princes would go out and start their training for warfare. Meals would be just the two. There would be breakfast and there would be dinner at sundown. Just before dinner, the princes were allowed to go down to the river back again to have a bath. And that was a time when there would be a bit of rivalry between them and a bit of play between them. And some games were played until they were gathered back at the mess hall for dinner at sundown, after which it was time to go to sleep and go to bed, for the next day would be just as hard as the previous day. And Drona ran it like a regimented army barracks. There was discipline everywhere, and it was absolutely strict. And the knowledge imparted was of various types. Everybody was made to learn every form of weaponry and every form of theory too. Nobody was left behind. And over time, individual warriors started excelling in the weapon of their choice. Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, became adept in the use of the spear. Bhimasena and the eldest Kaurava, Duryodhana, became adept in the use of the mace, and there was no equal in all of them. Arjuna, the third Pandava, became adept in the use of the bow and the arrow. Arjuna was very good in the use of all weapons, but in the bow and the arrow, he was unparalleled. The younger twins, the Sahadeva and Nakula, they became adept in the use of the sword. And all the other Kaurava brothers became adept in the weapon of their choice. Over time, the training started becoming more and more intense. And Drona then started showing some of his colors. He would ensure that his son Aswatthama was taught more than everyone else. He would call Aswatthama aside occasionally while the others were out at play, and he would call Aswatthama aside and teach him certain secrets of war. It didn't escape the eyes of Arjuna. Arjuna knew he had a destiny, and Arjuna knew that that destiny would be fulfilled by this Guru Drona. And Arjuna knew that if he had to learn everything from Drona, he had to be sitting next to Drona at every instant. And so Arjuna would miss some of his meals occasionally, would miss the time of rest, would miss the time of games and play and leisure activities to ensure that he never left the side of his Guru. For not an instant would Drona be left alone to teach Aswatthama the secrets of war. Arjuna was a very bright student, and Drona realized that Arjuna would not leave his side. Now, Drona was from the ancestry of Angirasa. Angirasa, the Maharishi who taught Shukracharya, who was not his son, more than he taught his own sons. But somehow that attribute was lost along the way, and Drona had none of that. Drona would try every opportunity to ensure that Aswatthama was taught more than Arjuna. And it was that greed of the father, that nepotism that arose from Drona, that he wanted to teach Aswatthama more than what Arjuna was taught. He could not openly ask Arjuna to leave, for his bread and butter and jam consisted from the money that was being paid by the Kuru kingdom, the Hastinapura kingdom. And Drona would not dare to say anything that would harm that source of revenue. And hence he would devise various plans and ways in which the others would all be away and Aswatthama would be next to him. One common way was to ask all the Pandavas and the Kauravas and Aswatthama to bring water to be cooked for the use for the cooking and the bathing in the Ashrama, in the Gurukula. He would purposely give Ashwathama a vessel with a very large neck so that he would fill the water earlier, while all the others got vessels with extremely small openings. And so, when they would go to the stream out far away and fill their vessel with the water, Ashwathama would be able to fill this vessel the earliest and would rush back to Drona. And in those few minutes that it took the others to reach back, Drona would teach Ashwathama some secret. And it didn't escape the view of Arjuna, who realized that he had to get in on those secrets. Now, Bhishma would often come to the Gurukul of Drona to check on him, to ask him whether he needed anything, and generally to take stock of the progress of the Kuru princes. And during one such time, Arjuna came and spoke to Bhishma and told him that he wanted to learn the art of the Varunastra from Bhishma. And Bhishma laughed when he found out why, and he agreed, and he taught Arjuna the art and the mantra for the Varunastra. And when Drona would send the princes out to the river to collect water, Arjuna would go to the side and fill his vessel with the Varunastra and rush back to his Guru Dronacharya and tell him, Acharya, teach me everything that you know. And over time, Drona softened towards Arjuna. Drona realized that he was a student par excellence and that it was very difficult for him to teach Aswatthama anything without Arjuna being close by. And he accepted that Arjuna would have to be taught everything. Over time, seeing the sincerity of Arjuna, seeing the hard work of Arjuna, and seeing the intense love that Arjuna showed to Drona, which was much more than the love Ashwathama showed to Drona, Drona eventually began to teach more to Arjuna than he taught his own son Ashwathama. For Ashwathama at some point would take his father for granted and would go and spend his time with the Kaurava princes. For the Kaurava princes would also spend a lot of time with Ashwathama, knowing that if they would be nice to their teacher's son, the teacher would be nice to them. And while all this politics was going on, Arjuna, with a single-minded determination, would sit next to his master Drona, would fan him and keep him cool, would give him food, would wash his feet, would do everything to his master, to his Acharya Drona. And Drona, in turn, would selflessly teach everything to Arjuna. And this is something we learn from the relationship that Arjuna and Drona had. Drona was a selfish man at heart. There are mitigating factors for this selfishness. For Drona had a very difficult childhood. He saw penury, he saw bankruptcy, he saw his child, he was not able to give the luxuries, that basic luxuries to his child. He saw his wife Kripi crying at night at his son being insulted by the boys around for not having money. And penury brings about a certain amount of bitterness in you. And Drona had that bitterness. There was no doubt about it. And he would have continued having the bitterness, and that bitterness would have shown through had it not been for this wonderful student he had, Arjuna. And so it was this wonderful student Arjuna who changed the heart of Drona. Even today, we have the Arjuna Award for the greatest athlete of our time and the Dronacharya Award for the greatest teacher of the time. And if you go through the history of the Arjuna and the Dronacharya Awards, you will note that the Dronacharya Award is always given to teachers whose students have won an Arjuna Award. And so it is necessary to have an Arjuna for you to be regarded as a Dronacharya. And so the greatness of a teacher comes from the greatness of a student. It's also vice versa. Great teachers do bring out great students. But only if a teacher has a great student will the teacher then be recognized as being great. And so over time, Dronacharya started teaching Arjuna everything he knew. He taught Arjuna the art of fighting with both hands, of using the bow with both hands, and henceforth Arjuna would be known as Sabyasachi, an ambidextrous warrior. But still, at times, there would come in the heart of Drona, is Arjuna learning too much? Is he becoming too good? Will he be better than my son? And so, at every time when these thoughts would come out, he would hold back the knowledge that he would give to Arjuna. But Arjuna, in his sweet nature and his absolute devotion to his Guru, would then melt the heart of his Guru, and the Guru would relent. In one such episode, Dronacharya knew that the skill of fighting blind, the skill of fighting with your eyes blindfolded, was a different form of archery. The previous person who could do this was Pandu, Arjuna's father. In fact, that was the undoing for Pandu. For Pandu could shoot just hearing voices. And his accuracy at shooting the sage Kindama and his wife, who were disguised as the stag and the deer, was primarily from his ability to shoot blind. And Drona knew that only the greatest archers of the land would have the ability to shoot blindfolded. And training for shooting blindfolded started from training in the dark. For your ears had to be so keen as to make out the sounds. And using these sounds, you would learn where to actually shoot the arrows. And so Drona instructed the people in the mess not to give the children any food in the dark, and to ensure that there was always bright lights around when the food was being served. For he knew that this thirst for learning archery in the dark would come from eating in the dark, and this is exactly what happened. One such day, unfortunately for Drona, a wind was blowing through and all the lights went off. They were all torches that were kept as lights. All the torches were blown out, and there was absolute darkness. And everybody continued eating, including Bheema and Arjuna. And at that time, Arjuna realized that if his hand could go from the plate to his mouth without him being able to see a thing, why should it not go from the quiver to the bow, and he should be able to let loose arrows? And if he could know where exactly the the glass of water was, could he not shoot an arrow into the darkness? And so Arjuna decided that day that he will start training in the dark. And Arjuna kept the target for his archery with a small stone hanging on the thread, so that as the breeze blew, the stone would hit the target and the sound would come, and Arjuna would decipher from that sound where the target lay. And one night when Drona was going to bed, he heard the familiar twang of Arjuna's bow, and he knew what happened. He got up and walked into the darkness, following the sound of this young boy Arjuna, taking arrow after arrow, stringing it on his bow and letting it loose onto the targets placed at a distance, with just the sound of the ball hitting the target to let him know where the target was. And he went to his student Arjuna and hugged him and said, "You will truly be the greatest archer of Bharatvarsha, for I've never seen a student as great as you." And in this way, the training continued for the Kuru princes. And it was quite obvious that Arjuna had won the heart of his Guru Drona. And from that point on, his Guru Drona held nothing back. From that point on, everything that the Guru knew, the Shishya learnt. And many years later in the Kurukshetra war, Drona sees this as he fights Arjuna. For every secret that he knew of, which he would use in the battlefield, Arjuna knew at that very moment what that secret would be, and how Drona would use it, and what the best way to combat it was. And the duels that Drona and Arjuna used to have in the Kurukshetra war were of such great magnitude that the soldiers of both sides would stop and watch them fight. For they were equal in every way, and Drona was the person who had taught Arjuna everything he knew. And from that selfish man, Drona became the selfless guru, who taught with abundance, who taught more than he taught his son. And that was how a great student can bring out the greatness of a teacher. And until finally one day, Drona decided that he should put these children to the test. And the famous story of the wooden vulture on the top of a tree. So though Drona took a wooden vulture and perched it on the top of a tree and made all these princes line up and handed each one of them the bow and the arrow and said, I want you to shoot the head of that vulture. And everyone agreed. So one by one, the students started coming. Duryodhana came first. He was given the bow and the arrow and instructed by Drona, I want you to shoot the head of the vulture, take aim. And Duryodhana took aim. And then Drona asked, what do you see? And Duryodhana said, I see the tree, I see the vulture, and I see you, my great guru. He said, good, keep the bow and arrow aside. Let the next one come. And then Yudhishthira came. And then he asked Yudhishthira, what do you see? Take up the bow and arrow and take aim, and what do you see? And Yudhishthira said, not to be undone by Duryodhana. Yudhishthira said, I see the tree, I see the vulture, and I see you, O my great guru, and I see your lotus feet. For those feet are the ones I would want to touch and put my head to take your blessings every day. And when this was heard by everybody, each one wanted to do one better than Yudhishthira. And so they started seeing Drona's feet, Drona's hands. They started seeing Kripa, they started seeing Kripi, and they started seeing Aswatthama. And the list went on, and Drona didn't let anyone let loose the arrow. And finally, it was Arjuna's turn to take the bow and the arrow. And he said, take aim, Arjuna, tell me what you see. And Arjuna said, I see the beak and the eye of the vulture, O great Guru. And Drona asked, you not say anything else? And there was sniggering and smirking all around. What does this boy Arjuna say? Doesn't he know he has to see the feet of his Guru if he has to take aim? Without the blessings of the feet of the Guru, how can you take aim? Arjuna unwaveringly said, I see nothing else, O Guru. I see only the head and the eye of the vulture. And Drona said, let loose the arrow. And as the vulture fell down, everybody noticed that the arrow had cleanly gone through the head and through the eye. And this was the greatness of Arjuna. Next, we shall talk about the story of Ekalavya in the next episode. It's a short and beautiful story, and we shall discuss the story of Ekalavya in the next episode. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Nagendraya Namaha, Om Amme Narayana, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Subramanyaya Namaha, Om Anjanaya Namaha, Swamiye Sharanam Ayyappo, Om Guruve Namaha.